Okay,
Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Dr. Jane Durston, and we're going to take a look at healthy living and winter remedies. As ever, good to see you.
good to see you as well, Tony.
Um, yeah, I mean, I suppose, in terms of healthy living, weight loss comes into it up to a point, and that's gauged by BMI, yes, body mass
Yeah.
index. Can you explain that to us, Jane, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think weight loss is one of those things that, people, it's probably the commonest reason why people start to look at their how they're feeling, how they're looking. Either that or they've got a medical problem, which somebody has said that, it would be a good idea if they lost weight. And traditionally, it's been monitored by looking at the scales, but also in more recent times by looking at BMI, which has been used more in the medical sense to monitor whether someone is a healthy weight or not. And the BMI is body mass index. And it's actually a measurement which you can do yourself, and you can use calculators online. And it's actually a measurement of excess weight rather than excess fat, which
Mhm.
leads to some problems, which I'll talk about in a
Yeah,
minute.
sure. Yeah,
But basically, you measure your weight and your height, and as I say, there are calculators that will do it for you very easily, and it'll tell you whether your BMI is in the healthy range or not. But it has limitations because classically, men that are quite muscular can often have a BMI which is out of the so-called healthy range. And it's because the muscle actually weighs so much that it gives them an abnormally high BMI. And also, older adults tend to have more body fat than younger adults with the same BMI. So it's not necessarily a good thing just to look at BMI. Women tend to have more body fat as well for men with an equivalent BMI. So again, it's not a measurement of fat, it's just a measurement of weight. So it's not always a good idea just to look at BMI and say, well, it's unhealthy or it's healthy.
have they
Um,
changed the rules on it? Because some years ago, I had to go down to Guernsey. My mother had brittle bone disease, and they call everybody in on her death. And they said at that time my BMI was right on the limit. And
yeah.
yeah, I've checked it out recently on the National Health calculator, and it shows at
Yeah.
23.7, which appears to be within the limit.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of these things, they do change the goalposts. And also, it may just depend on what someone considers to be healthy. It might be that, okay, someone would look at you and say, well, it is not a healthy BMI, but there's nothing actually wrong with that.
Mm.
And you're quite a tall person, so it might be that again, it's bone mass that actually adds to your weight as well. And if you're a very tall person, it might be that your bone mass might be contributing more to the weight and therefore a higher BMI than somebody who's got more fat. So as I say, there are lots of reasons why it's not a particularly good measurement. And what people are actually tending to look at now is the waist to height ratio, which again is very easy to do yourself. All you need is a tape measure. And you measure your waist midway between your lowest rib and the top of your hip. And it's about level or just above your belly button generally. And your height, make sure you're measuring them both in the same units, so either inches or centimeters. And then basically you just divide the waist measurement by your height, and that gives you the ratio. And a
Right.
ratio of less than 0.5 is healthy for men and women, and that doesn't matter what your nationality or age is. And above 0.5, you may have a higher risk of things like diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and that sort of thing. So it's a much simpler one, and it's better as well because it's a better indication of fat around your internal organs, what they call visceral fat. And visceral fat is actually associated with those medical conditions that I've just talked about. So it is a better measurement of the fat that's more of a danger.
Now, we're seeing lots of things on the market at the moment to lose weight. Should we start off with pills?
Yeah, well, there's probably about 4 pills that are prescribable, and you'll find lots of herbal remedies as well, which fit into those categories, which may not be very efficacious, and that's probably the nicest way of putting it. The tablets that are generally prescribable by a doctor are not very nice. They have a lot of side effects, and they're generally only for short-term use. So again, their efficacious, their effectiveness in losing weight is very short-term, and I think it's much better to think of any sort of weight loss as not a sprint. It's more of a marathon. And it's something that you're going to need to do for probably most of your life if you're someone that struggles with your weight, or at least keep an eye on it. So pills aren't generally a good idea. And they also they don't teach anybody how to change their eating habits and change what they do. So it's the same for a lot of these things, whether it be pills, gastric bands, gastric balloons, anything like that. You've got to have some input about telling people how to eat properly and adjust their eating habits so that it becomes a long-term habit, not just a quick fix.
So, as far as the pills are concerned, the main aim is to suppress the appetite, is it? To make you feel as if you don't need to eat?
Some of them are. Some of them actually work in a slightly different way by actually blocking the absorption and laying down of fat. So they work in different ways. There is actually a drug on the market now, but it's actually an injectable called Wegovy, which is a once weekly injection generally now, which is being marketed for weight loss. And it's becoming very popular. But again, obviously it's an injectable. Some people don't like the idea of an injectable, and that works by slowing gastric emptying so that you feel fuller, and it also works on the chemicals in the brain to help you decrease your appetite. But again, it's not licensed for long-term use. And it's also not doing anything to help people address their eating habits, about what they're eating and how they're eating, which are just as important as anything else.
Yeah. I was looking at, I mean, you see a lot of adverts on the television for gastric bands and gastric
Yeah.
balloons. Incredibly expensive. Did a bit of research. They come out to about 15 grand or something crazy
Yeah.
like that. Now,
Yeah,
I can understand that the band is obviously a surgical procedure,
it
but the
is.
balloon, you swallow it. So
Yeah.
how do you get it out if it doesn't work?
And I'm not really sure about the technicalities of them. But if you can you can certainly use an endoscope, where you put one
Yeah.
down into your stomach to have a look, so you can get them out. But about the technicalities of how they're all actually used, I'm sure there's lots of different varieties. But yeah, there are lots of different ways of doing these, and I think you have to look at them and say, they're being advertised an awful lot of people who are overweight, who possibly could lose weight if they try different ways of managing their lifestyle. And I'm not saying that flippantly. I'm someone who has struggled with controlling my weight all my life.
Yeah.
And it's something that you have to, it's a mindset change about.
Yeah.
It's not just a case of, well, I'm going to go on this diet, which will be a certain length of time, and then I'll stop and everything will be fine. It won't, because you'll go back to doing exactly the same as you were before. So it's a mindset change about how you actually manage your own lifestyle. And it's much better to actually do it in a holistic way, and do it slowly and become comfortable with that. And so a gastric band is can be a quick fix, but it's generally only because it's invasive, and gastric balloons as well, because they're invasive, they're generally only used for what they call morbidly obese people whose BMI is over 35.
Okay.
And there is a risk, certainly with the gastric bands, quite a lot of complications potentially, and there are risks and complications from gastric balloons as well. So they're not something that is generally taken lightly, and anybody, you know, who thinks that they can go in and just have one done and lose a stone, you probably will lose a stone, but it's not something that you should consider for that type of weight loss.
No, because really, I suppose it's all down to calorie counting, isn't it? How much you actually put in and how much comes out, as it were, in terms of
Well,
exercise, etc.
I think this is where it starts to get really, really interested. There's a very good book by a lady called Zoe Harcum, called The Diet Fix, and it's a fascinating read. It's not technical. It's written in a way that is very easy to understand, and she actually goes through the science why dieting and calorie counting isn't actually the way to go forward. And so I'd really recommend it if people are struggling to understand why dieting and calorie counting doesn't work. And it doesn't work, because basically it becomes very intrusive and people can't keep up with it. And also it becomes very limited. And the sums just don't add up. If you listen to her or read her explanation about what is happening, we could, if it was just a case of energy in, energy out, we could all lose weight very, very easily. And anybody who's tried to lose weight or even put weight on knows that actually it's not that easy. And the sums just don't add up. It's much more than just energy in, energy out. And that's why I think it's more important to actually look at it in terms of holistic health and say, right, well, what is my lifestyle? What am I eating? Am I making good choices as far as food is concerned? Am I eating at the right time for me? And not, you know, we're not all the same. We don't all need to eat at the same time. Am I sleeping properly? What's my stress level? If you're stressed, you're far more likely to put weight on, particularly if you're somebody that goes to the fridge to get something for comfort eating. So there's those sort of things that really need looking at altogether, rather than just saying, oh, I just need to watch what I eat, because it just doesn't work.
I had an experience in my 30s where I suppose I've been eating the wrong stuff. Christine didn't know. And and I got up to 14 stone 7. And I
Yeah.
was out gardening one day and I got tremendous pain in the heart region. And I thought, I wonder if I'm doing myself, you know, not too much good here. I think I went to see the doctor and he said, oh, you just pulled a muscle. But it sort of got me onto a regime whereby I was able to gradually reduce my weight from 14 down to 11.7, at which point I looked incredibly gaunt. So I
Yeah.
then lifted it back up. And I've been quite fortunate. I've been able to hold 12.7, which is the weight I had when I was a sort of mid-teenager, you know, all the way through my life sort of thing. But, you know,
Yeah.
it is all about dedication and perseverance. You know, it ain't going to happen magically. But
No,
there we
no,
are.
that's right. Yeah.
So,
I think one of the big successes really though with eating has been with people with type 2 diabetes.
yeah.
And Dr. David Unwin, who's a GP in the UK, has set up an online program. And it isn't just for people with type 2 diabetes, it's for people with pre-diabetes or even people that are struggling with their weight. because it's a way of actually eating healthily, but eating less carbohydrates. So there's things like your pasta, your rice, your bread, potatoes, those sorts of things, but also getting more of the healthy stuff in there so that you actually feel good, you feel full, you're eating healthy fats, but it's a way of actually getting to where you want to be in a healthy, sustainable way without sort of going on a fad diet or anything like that. So that's a really interesting concept. And it's also something that Zoe Harcum sort of talks about quite a lot as well. So I think that's a really interesting way of going forward.
Okay, so before we get on to recommendations in terms of a healthy diet, let's just have a quick look at the dreaded junk food. High calories there, and of course, you know, certain drinks, very high calories. You know, I'm not talking
Yeah,
about alcohol here. I'm talking about, I
yeah,
don't know, you know, Red Bull or whatever it is.
yeah. Energy drinks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so-called
yeah.
energy drinks.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I think junk food generally tends to be very high carbohydrate, very high fat, and unhealthy fats as well. And the combination to us is a real trigger, because once you start eating those types of food, that's what you want more of. And again, I'm going to recommend a book that I really enjoyed reading by Dr. Chris Van Tullecken, called Ultra Processed People. And he's subtitled that is Why Do We Eat the Stuff That Isn't Food, and Why Can't We Stop? And it's about this drive that high carb, high fat produces, along with lots of other processing and chemicals in there, which isn't food and we don't need, but it goes with the food because basically they have to make it taste good and they have to stop it going off.
Yeah,
And it's fascinating, but basically, ultra processed food is bad for us. There's no way around it. And if we just try and eat our food that's 80% good quality fresh food, you know, we don't have to all be angels. You can eat a bit of junk food if you want. You know, if you want a packet of crisps, yeah, I love a packet of crisps. So you can do things like that. But if the majority of your diet is actually healthy food, fresh food, then you will do much better on it. And you will notice that things actually start to work better in your body than they were doing before. But that's a really good book, and it's available on audio as well. So
okay.
if
Well,
you want to just listen to it, it's good.
bear that in mind. But essentially, these manufacturers and these people, sellers of hamburgers are creating an addiction almost, aren't they?
Yeah, these foods are designed to drive us to eat.
Yeah.
And there's no other way of putting it. It's designed to actually make you want to eat more of whatever you're eating.
Hmm.
So you will start and crave that saltiness, the sugary, the fat, because they're satisfying in the short term, but they're not satisfying long term. So you eat them, and then you know it's a bit like the old thing that used to be said about Chinese food. You know, half an hour later, you're absolutely craving another one. So it's those sort of things. They're designed to make you eat more of them,
Yeah.
and that's what happens.
Yeah. Okay, let's get on to some nutritious stuff, Jane. Um, First of all, whole grains.
Yeah, I think I'm yeah I like the idea of fresh food. So whole grains are really good for you. They're really good for nutritious value, vitamins, minerals. So you know, things like whole grain bread. If you can stomach whole grain pasta, that's really good as well. But I think all these things together with, you know, legumes, beans and lentils and that sort of, they're good, but the thing is not to go overboard with them,
Mm.
because, as I say, what I was talking about earlier on, bringing down your carbohydrate content of your food is actually quite good for you. So it's a case of getting that balance right, and combining it with, you know, good quality meat, fish probably more often than meat, and making sure you've got plenty of oily fish in there as well for heart health and brain health. It's so important to get your omega-3s up, and make sure you're getting enough to produce heart health and brain health. And you know, fruit and veg, more veg than fruit, but basically as much as you can eat.
Right.
Leafy veg, things like cabbage, broccoli, kale, those sorts of things, are just so good, and they're actually quite filling as well. So you can fill up on those sorts of things without producing too much detriment to your carbohydrate count.
Okay.
But yeah, those sorts of things are really good.
Okay. It was 5 a day. It
Yeah,
now appears to be 10 a day.
yeah.
So within that 10, how about pure orange juice and pure
Mm.
apple juice? Where does that fit in as far as you're concerned?
I would say don't. If you're going to eat have, or you want something fruity,
Mm,
then have the whole fruit. So have a whole apple or a whole orange rather than juice.
yeah,
The thing is with the juices is that because all the fibre has been taken out of them, or a lot of the fibre has been taken out, even if it says it's got, you know, whole juice in there,
yeah,
a lot of the fibre has still been taken out to get the juice out, and you will absorb that much faster, and you're also missing out on all the fibre that's good for your gut. So it's much better to actually have the whole fruit rather than juice, and that applies to any fruit basically, or any vegetable. Even if you're going down the carrot juice versus a whole carrot, go for the whole cooked
mm,
carrot rather
yeah.
than carrot juice.
So it's all about fibre, getting
Yeah,
down in the old tum and beneath,
absolutely.
yes, and
Yeah.
going forth. Now you've knocked out 2 of my 5 a day in one fell swoop.
Oh dear.
Well, not to worry, not to worry. What about pasta? You spoke just now. You were talking about grain, you know, whole grain sort of pasta. The real stuff, not really.
Yeah, I think it's all down to the, you know, don't go mad on it.
Mm,
And what I tend to do instead of having just wheat pasta, I can't eat wheat anyway, but
no,
instead of having wheat grain pasta, then look for pasta made from legumes. So you can get red lentil pasta, you can get ones made from mung beans, and there's lots of different varieties out there. And again, they're better because you've actually got the benefits of nutrition from those legumes rather than just wheat flour, which is
yeah.
what the pasta is made from. So you're actually getting more nutrition, you're getting more bang for your bucks basically. So they're a much better option. And again, some of them are actually lower carbohydrates than ordinary wheat pasta. So I'd always recommend that people have a go at those.
Am I right in thinking though that athletes use it as a bit of a boost, pasta?
Yes, a lot of athletes use pasta as you say, an energy boost. But in fact, they're probably better to have a really, not a really fatty meal, but a meal that contains more fat before, because the amount of storage in a fit athlete for glucose is actually quite small. So you can't load, they say that they're loading, but they can't load to that extent. So you're probably better actually using fat rather than, or become fat adapted,
Yeah.
rather than actually use carbohydrate as an energy, a long-term energy source.
We seem to see a lot of tennis players having bananas between games.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that makes more sense, if you like, because bananas are actually got quite a lot of sugar in them,
Hmm.
particularly the, you know, the nice white ones. So you can actually boost your sugar quite quickly
Yeah.
with that, which will give you an energy boost certainly.
Okay. Meat and cheese, any favourites there? You know, obviously limitations perhaps.
Um, I think it's really important to make sure that meat that you're having is of a good quality. If you can, organic is always better. But it's not necessary, you know, you don't necessarily have to organic. I mean, we're lucky on the island that, you know, we've got grass-fed beef and lamb, so that's good, that's great. But good quality is always better. And don't shy away from red meat. Red meat is a really important source of iron for us, and we need it. So, you know, don't shy away from it. The important thing is not to make it something that you have every day of the week, or maybe more often than that. But to also, you know, fit in some chicken in there, and go for fish. Go for oily fish if you can. There's lots of choice out there for oily fish, whether it be salmon, mackerel, sardines, and tinned fish counts just as much as fresh fish. So that really helps, as I say, to boost your omega-3 fats for your brain health and your heart health. But there's no, at one time, you know, it was said that, you know, meat is bad for you, and there was a big drive that everyone should become vegetarian or even vegan. And a lot of people, me included, just don't do very well on vegetarian meals, let alone vegan. And I actually, when I tried to eat less meat and become vegetarian, I actually became quite anemic. So you have to be careful with what you do to alter your diet. So always try and get at least a couple of servings of red meat, which will keep your iron levels up, and also give you a lot of good vitamins as well. So don't shy away from them. Cheese as well, you know, people say, oh, you shouldn't eat cheese because it's bad fats. Again, it's down to eating the right amounts. Cheese is a really good source of vitamin K, which is needed to help absorb and utilize vitamin D. And we all know, you know, how important vitamin D is now. So don't shy away from it. And a lot of people, even if they're lactose intolerant, can eat cheese, or they can try used milk cheese, which doesn't have the same lactose in it.
Coming on to unhealthy food, the consequences can be pretty severe, can't they, ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're far-reaching now, that and it's only just beginning to hit home, I think, how eating a bad diet can really impact your health. That there's a great website called Food for the Brain, which looks at the impact of food and lifestyle on dementia. And there's some really great information there. And I mean, you know, Hippocrates all those years ago said, let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. And he got it absolutely right. If what you take in is rubbish, then don't expect your body to be performing at top notch. You have to look after it, and you have to give it the right things to actually allow it to do what it's meant to do, which is basically to thrive.
Sure.
So it's really, really important that you know, you keep up with a good diet. Yes, everyone will have, you know, days when you don't eat very well, or, you know, one particular meal, and you'll say, well, okay, that wasn't very balanced. Balance is about looking it over, not even just a day, but perhaps over a week, and saying, what have I eaten that was good? What have I eaten that wasn't so good? How could I have made better choices? And I think that's really important to actually keep that in mind, that it's a long-term thing. So don't look at it on a short-term meal on your plate or that day. Look at it on a week by week. And that's where meal planning really plays out, because you can do that. Then you can say, what do I need to eat this week?
Exercise and sport.
Yeah.
Keeping those old legs going.
Yeah. And I think it's so important. I mean, I always like to think of it of movement rather than exercise.
Yeah.
You know, to get out and walk. And walking is still one of the best, you know, sort of forms of movement you can do, because it's kind on the joints.
Yeah.
And that's really, really good. And it gets you out in the fresh air, hopefully. It's good for mental health. I mean that if you're a sports person and you like team sports, or things like tennis or whatever, then there's a social aspect, which again is very good for mental health. So that it's really finding something that you can do consistently, whether it be dancing inside or whatever. It's the movement that's important. And I think the trend for high impact exercise is probably sort of declining a little now, in that we're high intensity exercise for short periods of time is fine, but it's actually balancing it with other things that give you a different form of exercise, which allow for better joint movement, balance, coordination, and some relaxation. So things like yoga, Pilates. I'm a great fan of Qigong now, or even Tai Chi, because they're movements that bring all those things together, but are a great stress relief as well.
Where are we on unhealthy practices? Alcohol, I mean, in moderation, okay?
Yeah, I mean the latest recommendations from the Chief Medical Officer is now that to keep low risk, adults should not drink more than 14 units a week, which is is a reasonable amount if you look at it.
Yeah.
If other people might look at it and say that's really low, but it's not. I don't think you can actually say now that alcohol is not doing you any harm. It's not doing you any harm at the moment, but the accumulative results are certainly evident, and there's higher risks of heart disease, cancer, and all the other things that we know about, as well as dementia, that go with excessive alcohol use.
What's a unit? A glass of wine?
Yeah, well, it depends on the size of your glass. It's actually
Only a
the
tiddly
small.
widdly one.
Yeah, it's a very small unit of a very small glass of wine. So, every time you say, "Oh, well, I'll just have a medium or I'll have a large,"
Yeah.
I think a large is probably pushing 3 units.
Yeah.
So, you have to be careful when you're starting to get to those sort of levels, because you really are ramping your units up.
Mm.
And again, every so often, maybe we might imbibe a bit more, but on a regular basis, it's not so good. I think it's always better as well if you have some days off in the week,
Yeah.
to let your body recover, so that you're not drinking every day. And generally, just try not to do as much. And I think it's quite noticeable, if you're not drinking as much, how much more energy you sleep better.
Yeah.
So there are lots of things to be said for it.
Now,
Smoke. Go on, sorry.
I was going to come on to smoking because Mr.
Yeah,
Zoom's telling me we're into countdown. I think we're agreed that smoking doesn't do you any good. What about vaping? Is that so new it's not proved?
no, vaping. It's already showing problems, with breathing problems, organ damage, addiction, all the other things. Because basically, you're just inhaling a load of obnoxious chemicals into your lungs. It's just not good. It's not good. And it was supposedly said at one time that it was a way to get people off cigarettes, but I don't really think it's actually showing to be that successful. It's just another way of people taking in nicotine in a different form and causing a different type of lung damage.
And being marketed very well by the manufacturers. And there
Absolutely.
you go from there. Now,
Yeah.
we've talked in general terms about cod liver oil and vitamin D and others. When's a COVID jab? Are we due one?
Yeah.
Do you know?
Are we
The
what? Sorry.
elderly?
Yeah, I think they have narrowed the parameters of people who will be vaccinated, but I think the elderly definitely will be there. The same for flu vaccines, and I think RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, as well, is being targeted for the elderly now, with at risk problems, at risk groups. So I think they're all good to have, as long as you are within that group, and it's a personal choice at the end of the day. But my thoughts are, if you're an at-risk group, then think about it seriously.
I was talking to a certain local pharmacist the other day with whom I have the highest regard. And he said, if it's there, pump it in. And I think he's right from that point of view. But the RSV is in addition to the pneumonia injection, isn't it? I think.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a different vaccine, and it's specifically they're looking at I think children as well, in the UK. I don't know whether they're doing that on Ireland, but certainly children in the UK. Although I might be wrong with that, but I think I've seen something.
Yeah.
So you know, it is something that's targeting specific groups, and certainly people with chest problems should think about that.
Bear that in mind. Jane, it's been wonderful talking to you. Your words of wisdom, what can I say? But
Thank you
thank you
very
very
much for
much.
inviting me. No,
Well,
thank you.
it's my pleasure. And, you know, we'll have another one perhaps next spring to see how we cope through the summer. Jane,
Yeah,
thank you so much. Bye for now.
thank you. Bye.